right, so Sohee, thank you so much for joining us here. I'm excited. This is a really fun episode. Really fun person, full of energy and power and all these great things that we'll talk about. So for the people watching, what I want to do is give you just a little bit of time to talk about your background and how it all started and tell us where you are today.
Well, first, I'm so excited to be here, and so thank you for asking me to do this. That was a lot. So let's start with first how I got started. And I would say that, you know, I've always been very interested in people and what makes them behave the certain way that they do. And that led me into the field of psychology. I knew pretty quickly that I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist, which was really booming at the time. But I took this course in grad school called Industrial Organizational Psychology, and I fell in love as soon as I went through the course and was learning that you can blend business with psychology. I fell in love, and I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to, you know, help them be the best that they can be, and if you can do that in service of the company and an organization where people spend most of their time and their lives, why not? So I went, you know, found a program through grad school, and it's, you know, been a field that I've been in for 20 years now. I love it. I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to be doing what I love, which a lot of people go searching for. So yeah, I've been doing this work for about 20 years. My niche currently is helping emerging leaders, and I serve as a leadership coach, and I work with high potential women as well. So, you know, I can go all into like how I found that niche, but currently leadership coach and doing organization development work as well.
Yeah, that leadership piece it's huge, and right now I see it everywhere. So what does it look like when a client calls you and say, hey, we need some, we have some emerging leaders, or we think there's some here, can you help us? Do you help now identify them, or do you already work with them? What does that look like?
So typically if an organization calls me, they are already aware of who their high potentials are and the leaders that are next in the pipeline. So they've been identified, which is great. What I do is I take a step back and I say, okay, let's pause for a second and let's get to the root of why does this person need coaching? But also, you know, what is this in service of? What's their goal? What is the company's goal for the person? Does it match with their goals as well? So you kind of do an assessment to really make sure that this is all in service of, you know, the good for the company and the person. And from there, you know, I get to the why. You know, why do we want to coach this person? Are they ready? What are they looking for? And making sure that I'm a fit for them as well, because I do firmly believe in chemistry with the coach, the person that you're coaching, and the coachee. So there has to be a fit, and so I assess for all of that. So I don't go right in saying, yes, I'm the one. I don't profess that. I think there are lots of great coaches out there, and you just have to really find the right fit and the person with that niche, which for me, I've carved out.
Yeah. There's this sense that coaching is such a like wide umbrella of things. Is there a particular area that you are passionate, like a type of person that you enjoy working with? I know you mentioned emerging leaders, but there could be so many, right? Who is that individual that you would work with?
Yeah. So when I say emerging leaders, again, I'm thinking of that person that are kind of mid-tier directors and VPs that are ready for the next big role, P&L-wise, team size-wise, all of that. And they need the support to get to that big role. And you probably have found in organizations too where the support is given to like top of the house, which is great. They need the support too, but it's those director, VP people that really want it and need it to be the best leader they can be. So that's one. The other group that I love working with is what I call high performers, and high-performing women in particular. And I love working with these individuals because I find, obviously I'm a woman, and not only have I lived it in terms of managing and going through that, kind of learning from that experience, but I also know what it's like to have come from a place of, am I enough? You know, can I do this? Do I suck? How do I be an authentic leader? How do I find those things that are true to me, but are also, you know, leadership characteristics or what have you? So I feel like I've walked the talk, and I can really serve those women that want to find what success means for them and show up authentically in that way.
That's powerful. I love the piece where you mention you walk the walk, right? Or walk the talk the walk. I've heard in different ways, but in my opinion, and talking to a lot of people, what I've seen and noticed is there's a reason people get into the things that they get into. And I know you mentioned you love the field of IO and kind of the opportunities it brought, but I'm also sensing that maybe there was someone along the way that helped you, or maybe it's the opposite, that you had a lack of help, so now you want to be the person that champions, I want to help other women, or I want to help these leaders that could be more.
Yeah.
Was there someone?
Yes, I mean, I have to say, it's a little bit of both. I think that in my career, I have found, I mean, I'll be honest, I've had bosses that did the best they could, but they weren't the best leaders for me. And I have also had the fortune of having really good leaders who believed in me, who allowed me to shine, and who allowed me to take risks. But along my journey of that, I was fortunate enough to coach within organizations and really work with some women that were struggling with these same things. I'll also say I have 3 children who I love dearly, and it always came to like how, especially with women that have kids, how do I do this? Do we have balance? What does balance look like? Do I lean in? Do I lean out? At the time when that was popular. And I've really come to appreciate all of their struggles, because I struggle with the same thing. I've done the part-time, I've done the full lean in, really hard leaning in, I've done the leaning out, aggressive leaning in, I've done the leaning out. I think I've done all of it and trying to find what was true for me. And that's my core message as a coach with these women is, what is true for you? And how do we help you own that? Because your truth isn't my truth. My truth was going out on my own and really trying to make my own firm and make it work, because that's what was true for me and my success. And you know, so many of us women are not walk around with the shoulds.
Right.
I should be. I should look this way, or that person that I admire does it this way, so I should be that. And it's really just deconstructing all of that and allowing that person to feel free to own their own truth, which could be completely different.
Oh, wow. Okay. So coming from, you mentioned now you have your own practice and you run your own shop. At some point you were in corporate. At some point you were clocking in and checking in and running things, right? At what point did you decide enough is enough and now I want my own truth, and my own truth is this? What was that? What was that point?
Gosh, that was a big year. So I would say that was around 2012. But again, mind you, like I had been trying things as I'm coaching these women. I'm taking my own risk too, and I talk a lot about this with women that I coach is you can take micro risks, you can take bigger risks. For me, just the way that I live my life and who I am, I took a giant risk because I felt like around that time, I felt ready. I just knew, I was listening to my gut. You know, I didn't want to listen to it, but I felt ready to take that risk. Now, I will share with you, Abraham, that was like the biggest learning of my life, because I jumped without a net, meaning I didn't have a business plan. I just knew directionally where I wanted to go. And I did it and learned how to position myself, how to, how to take projects that I wanted, and I was getting all the crap projects that I didn't want, and I was trying to figure out why that was, what's my brand, what's the value that I bring. So it was a lot of just, real street, like get through experience, learning.
Right.
And of course there were people that I went to for advice and things, but you learn by doing.
Yeah, yeah. So this entire series is based on thinking differently. And right now, what I'm hearing is a little bit of, you just took a leap, right? You trusted your instinct, and even though mentally maybe you weren't ready, but you just felt like it was the right thing. So if you were to do this all over again, right, and we're back in 2012, and you have now all this experience, how would you go back and say, Sohee, let's think about this differently? here's some of the things that you should look out for, because there's probably people right now that want to start their own shop, or maybe they're in corporate and they are a mom and they're like, I think I could do this on my own, right? What are some tips or lessons that you learned along the way that you can share?
So I'm going to share this, and it's going to be super counterintuitive, but it's what women do all the time, which is ask their tribe. Abraham, what do you think I should do? 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 And we over tilt on that. And I think that because we tend to want everyone's thoughts, because we think that will be the better outcome, sometimes that may be the case. Oftentimes with decisions like this, it's not. And I found that we get stuck in all the voices and ignore our own. We women in particular, and me in particular, truly, I would go, I don't know, this feels scary. So what do you think? What do you think I should do? You probably have heard or talked to women that do that. Not a bad thing again, but it takes us away from our true knowing. So what I would say is, get real quiet. Get real quiet and tune in. Tune into what you know is true for you. And that's really scary. So back then, I would tell myself exactly that. It's, what do you want to be in service of? What does your success look like? Visualize it and go for that. Take micro actions to go for that. You don't have to. I would probably advise someone not to take that big leap like I did without a net, but really build out the micro actions, which equate to small steps that you can take to get there.
Right, so once you look at the whole picture, you've consumed this entire process instead of just doing it all at once, right? There's a couple of things you mentioned that I want to call out, and one is where I hear this all the time with coaching clients, where they'll ask, what do you think I should do? And one of my mentors and coaches said to me, when you ask for advice and you find yourself overly asking, it's because you don't want to take responsibility. And you want someone else to have the responsibility to say, here's what you should do. But then what happens is you end up going with their point of view, you end up going with their truth, because we're all just giving each other our own vision of reality and our own vision of the world, right? So here I could tell you, here's what you should do, but it's all based on what I think is the right thing to do. It may not be what you want in your life, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I've learned and that I'm sensing in your journey too, is that if you just pause and pay attention to what you want and where you want to go, you end up getting where you want to be and what you want. You just have to pace yourself, be mindful of where you are, and listen to yourself, right? I tell people, you're your own best coach.
I think that's exactly right. What you said right there is like listening to yourself is key. And I do think some of this is gender, where women are a little bit socialized to listen to the world and take that as the cue versus listening to your own inner voice. And at some point it gets washed down, or we just kind of put it aside so far that we don't really know what it's saying to us. So I do, and especially high-performing women that I coach, I mean, goodness, they are high-performing for a reason. They're go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. But what I really challenge them to do is let's take a step back and pause, which is the hardest thing any high-achieving person can do, right? Pause for a second. I know it's scary. Let's create those white spaces where you can really be intentional about what you are wanting to be in service of. And that's a really big question. What do you want to be in service of? And what does that look like for you? And going back to your question of what would I have told myself when I was, back then, I got the chance to do it again, because after that first stint, I went back internal to a corporate company. And then I made the leap again, but this time was so much smarter about it. Abraham, I have to tell you, I'm like, well, let me take my own medicine. I got really clear about the services I wanted to provide, what my true, where my true value lies, and focusing really on that.
Yeah. Do you, when you're coaching clients, do you have, I know you talked about high-performing women, but if I was to come to you or another guy says, hey, would you coach me? Do you have a different approach as to how you would coach them? Or do you find the same philosophy works for stick to your truth, find your passion, and drive forward?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I think there are some baseline similarities. Where I differ with women is that I speak from experience that resonates differently for the different genders, right? And I find that when I coach the women, they're like, yes, that's me, I totally get that, we've been there, so there's a kind of a faster connection, faster bond. With men, I certainly will coach them as well, but it's more about, okay, let me really reframe it in a way that works for them. And again, that goes for women as well, because everybody's different, but I'm much more intentional about it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, the question here is, you mentioned there's a difference when women come to you, right? Sometimes they'll over-ask their tribe, and they'll say, what should I do, or what do you think? Do guys do that as well? Do you find that there's a difference in the things that they say during these coaching moments?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question. I'm careful not to make this a gender thing, but I think that in general, what I have seen in my experience is that that's less true for men. And I think that my work with them has been in helping them to slow down to getting to solutioning, right? They're more tempted, I think, from the ones that I've coached to get to solutioning. And for me, it's helping them look at it from all different perspectives to really just consider all that's in front of them. And to just, again, slow down, because we are, just as a society, I think, picking up pace. So it's creating that pause.
Yeah, and I sense that, I don't know about you, but I've sensed that people feel that if you're busy, that means you're productive. And if you're productive, that somehow equals you being successful. But I've often seen where it's the opposite, where someone says, I'm only focusing on this very tiny number of things, and I'm dedicating my full energy and resources to it, and they feel good about it.
Yeah.
Do you find something similar like that?
Gosh, I find myself like that. Honestly, I think that we have just made being busy so sexy. I mean, if you talk to anybody, what's the first thing out of their mouth? I'm so busy, I'm so busy. It's like we are on autopilot with that word, which then frames how we think about things, which then frames how we act on things. So, there's a powerful connection between word and, action and all that. But, yeah, I think that most everybody does that. And in order to slow down, you have to be so intentional and get focused, because if you look at the successful people of the world, I mean, generally they tend to be hyper-focused.
Okay, so I want to ask you this question. You have already shared how you got into the field and some of the things that you're doing. You gave us some insight and some tips on what would you tell yourself if you were to do this all over again.
Yeah.
But I know you, and you always have something going on. So can you share it? Are you working on anything special? Any key projects that you might have?
Yes, I am. I'm so glad you asked this question. I am working on something that I've been thinking about for a few years now. Okay. And it's been, I think, brewing, but it wasn't until I really sat down with a colleague of mine who was like, that's your thing. And I'm like, what's my thing? My thing is being a working mom, right? So my passion project, and it really is like, I have 3 kids, but it's like giving birth to a 4th kid, which is writing a book. And it was really inspired by that conversation and all of the different risks I took and all the ways I experimented with my career to try to find some sort of what I now call integration. And it's not about balance, because my firm belief, and I tell this to women that I coach, is that it's not about having it all. It's about integrating those pieces that are really important to your life at this time, knowing that the phases will change. So my book is really about how do I help women own, again, what is their definition of success? What does that look like? Inclusive of their family and their career, and how do we help them take steps to get there? And for me, it was trial and error about integrating my life and what leads first and how do I do that. Yeah. And being okay that my definition of success isn't about that big corner office all the way at the top being the president of something. If somebody wants to do that, that's fantastic. But make that your truth, and not because you think you should or that's what you've been told to do. Right? So the book is all about that. It's finding your authentic success.
Ooh, When can we get this book? When does it?
The book. The goal is to get it out by the end of summer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share the title of it, which has a special meaning to me, and it's called Mommy Tracked. And why that's special to me is that in corporate terms, Mommy Tracked means that you're on the track to be put to the side. It's not really a good thing. And so I want to flip it around and really make it a thing about, yeah, I'm on the mommy track, which means I'm defining my own, what success looks like to me, and I'm owning it, and I'm taking the actions I need to get there.
Wow, that's powerful. I love the piece on integration, because even myself, right? I think about this all the time, where work-life balance is this big thing for a lot of people, and you hear it everywhere. But if you really pause and think about what that means, it's impossible to get.
Yes.
Because if you are in a corporate setting and you are working as an exempt employee, right? You're not there hourly, which means you're gonna clock out. It's not like your work stops there, right? You keep thinking about work, and the higher up you go in the organization, the more responsibilities you get, and you get more stressful, you get text messages, you get phone calls, you get video this, and if you're now leading a global team, you have to do it in multiple time zones. So when does that leave the balance? There is no balance, right? You have to find that integration of, okay, between these hours I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna switch modes into this and integrate it.
Yes.
Maybe you're gonna take a jog, but you can be on a conference call, right? We're just listening in. And so I love that piece on the integration. At what point did you realize that was you, and that was like what you wanted to write about?
I think it really clicked for me probably back in 2016, when I was feeling super burnt out, when I was like going on all cylinders. And I think literally I write this in the book, which is I fell asleep sitting up. Like I don't know how this happens, but like I was so exhausted. I was coaching my daughter's soccer team. I was working 50, 60 hours a week. I had the large team I was managing, and I was doing the grocery shopping, and I was taking so much on because I thought I had to do it all, and I didn't know what integration meant at that time. And I literally was just like this, with my kids draped all over me, and my husband happened to take a picture.
Yeah.
And it's funny to look at, but it really is the plight of a lot of women, working women, where we just go without really being intentional and trying to integrate, which means that you lead with what's important to you in the season of that life, of that moment, right? So for me, and this moment of my life, it means that I have this lifestyle and this work system because I want to integrate it much more with my kids.
Yeah.
And I am the room mom, and I do volunteer at the school stuff because that's important to me. And that's how I define success. The next season might look different, and I might lean much more into work than I do at the home front. So it's just about defining and being flexible with it, and not hard charging on one course because you think that that's what you have to do.
Oh, that's huge, the flexibility piece. I sense that all these people get, even I find myself being guilty of this sometimes, where I get so focused on one thing, and then if I don't accomplish it, I feel guilty and I feel bad about it. But then I have to coach myself and remind these moments like flexibility. You have to go with the season, you have to go with the flow, you have to go with what's in front of you. And sure, you have some challenges ahead, but you can't let that slow you down, right? So as far as tips or recommendations, what do you have for people to be able to just pause and remind themselves of being flexible or agile thinking, and how do they do that?
Yeah. I mean, I personally think a really easy one, and I say easy because you don't need to like equipment or things. So I do a meditation called Headspace. So for me, that helps me just ground myself and really focus in on, okay, where am I? How do I want to do this day if it's a day-by-day thing? Or, how do I want to show up, and what's leading for me? Is it, my work project right now, and do I put everything else on the, side burner, whatever that looks like. But even before that, because what I recommend is that people get real clear on their values. And values, I think, can shift based on again, the time of your life, right? It's not like this set in stone. There may be some core values that stay, but some can shift, and that's okay. And I think that's the flexibility piece. So getting clear on that, for me, the value of family and having freedom and having creativity, those are core to me, and I get that through the way that I live now. So it's asking people to just slow down for a second, and let's get really clear about what your values are and how you're being intentional about bringing that to life, right? And if you do that, all that noise and all of the busyness will sort itself out because you're more clear about what you need to do.
Yeah, I feel that that goes right back to the thing you talked about the truth. What is your truth? And if you're always changing your truth, or you don't know what your truth is, you're living someone else's truth, you're shifting directions. You're always kind of haphazardly ending up somewhere, and you're questioning why you're there.
Yep.
But if you have that core, and then you know what it is and why it's there, I feel that it connects you to it, right? And so if you deviate from your path, and then you're like, oh, right, this is why I'm here, you kind of go back to it. So I love it. Now, let's talk about books, right? Let's talk about, you mentioned you have this book coming out, but what kind of books inspire you? What kind of things do you gravitate towards that maybe someone out there can benefit from as well?
Yes. There was a book, and I read, I'm sure you do too, I read so many books, and there's so many that I love, but this one really stuck out to me because I remember I was having a conversation like this with a colleague of mine, a woman that I really admire. Her name is Annette, and I was like, I really, want to be on this path of serving women and high-performing women and coaching, and she's like, well, have you read this book called Playing Big by Tara Mohr, M-O-H-R? And I was like, no. So I grabbed it, I bought it off Amazon, and as soon as I read it, I was like, this book. It's magic because it just talks about all of the ways in which we play small and how we downplay our ambitions, whatever that looks like, and keep ourselves contained. And so why do we do that? But also, how can we play big, and what does playing big mean to you and to me? So that book was pivotal in just allowing me to own my truth and jump into that. And I would say, I love Brene Brown. Who doesn't? Like, maybe there are people that don't, but Brene Brown is just, her message about being authentic and being vulnerable. I really live by that, and I think that we need to see more of that in leadership, no matter the gender. So
powerful. I love it. I want to bring us close now to the end here, right? And so as we're wrapping it up, what are some takeaways here that you want the audience to get, and what do you want them to learn from this session that we're having here as this conversation?
Yeah, great question. So I would say one big takeaway is that your definition of success could be completely different, and that's okay. And in order to tune into your definition of success, you have to quiet down, pause for a second, and really listen to what your voice is saying to you. Is it climbing the corporate ladder? Is it being on your own? Is it being somewhere in between? Whatever that looks like, it's allowing that to come up and letting that percolate and seeing where that takes you. And in order to do that, you have to create space. So, maybe you journal. So one of the things that I really love doing is free-form journaling, seeing what comes up. Just, what are the kind of stream of consciousness things that come up, and are there any threads that come up for you? So that can give you some insight. But also, the other tip that I think is really powerful for people is to understand your values. And you can look this up online about what are my values. There's a lot of different exercises. I also will have it in my book about how to identify your values so that then you can start taking actions that align to that. Yeah.
Sohee, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. I always love talking to you. There's always something that I'm learning and growing, right? I feel like I'm always growing with you, so I appreciate that. Now, I'm going to pass it over to you for some takeaways. So we want to wrap this up, but I want the audience to learn 3 things. So what are those 3 things you want them to take away?
So I would say, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I love this platform and how you help people think differently. So my 3 takeaways are really, 1, the message of slowing down. How can we create space so that we can really hear what's going on for us and own our definition of success, right? Create the space because it'll come up. Secondly, it's identifying your core values, because that will lead you to the 3rd step of micro actions. So once you have your values, that's going to be in my book, you can then take the small steps necessary to get to the end goal. And why that's important is that it can be very overwhelming. So break it up to pieces, take the micro actions you need, and then you'll get there.
Love it, love it. So as you can see, Sohee just helped us think differently about being a high performer and coaching. And so with that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.